Hey, welcome. Thanks for tuning in today. Chelsea and I are really looking forward to talking to you about which puzzle piece is ours. Kind of the idea that SEL has a huge spectrum of components. We as educators are really going to lock in on a smaller portion of that. We're both from the Vail School District in Southern Arizona, and we're just really glad that you are tuning in today. Who we are specifically, my name is Brent Edwards. I've been with the Vail District for nearly 20 years. My focus was middle school and high school math. I'm joined today by my partner, Chelsea Scopoletti. Chelsea, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Chelsea Scopoletti, one of the Beyond Textbooks coordinators here in the Vail School District. I was also a middle school teacher. I taught 7th and 8th grade for many years before moving into kind of a curriculum coordinator position called a student achievement teacher, and now moving over to Beyond Textbooks. Really excited to be here today and to talk about social emotional learning.
We were also joined because, full disclosure, I was a math teacher, Chelsea was an ELA teacher. We are not experts in this area, so we reached out to the experts. You're going to hear from Leslie Anway and Gloria Bernal. We also spoke with our district school psychologist, Debbie Dubrava, and Heather Stow, who is our community and connections director. She puts a lot of these strategies into place in our community. So a lot of what we're sharing today relies on the framework and the foundations and the skills of these ladies. All of our contact information is on page 1. We would love to hear from you after today if there are follow-up questions or really anything that we can do for you.
So what are we going to talk about today? This is our agenda, and you have this in your packet as well. We're really going to talk about the importance and the benefits of social emotional learning. We really like Castle's framework, so we're going to identify the 5 core competencies there, and then we're really going to dive into 2 of them. The 2 core competencies that we believe that educators maybe need the most support in. Before we wrap up today, we will also provide a network of resources for needs that are maybe beyond what we can do in a school setting so that folks have those tools available. One thing we did want to mention before we move forward too much further is that our contact information, like Mr. Edwards shared, is in your packet. Also, you will need a phone or maybe a different window, browser window, so that for an activity that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I think we're also going to use the chat bar quite a lot, so if that's not already brought forward on your screen, locate that and get that forward. We're going to ask you to chat at several points through our session today, so have that ready to go. SEL is important. I think that's probably a no-duh for most of us after the last year that we've been through. One nuance there is I said to one of our school psychologists, man, it has gotten important and it's really gotten on our radar over the last year. And she said, no. For in the counseling and school psychology world, it's been critically important for over a decade. And there are others that are sort of just now becoming more aware of its importance. And full disclosure, that was me. I wasn't super aware of SEL until a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. It clearly has become a hot topic with the last year that we've all survived. What that has also brought forward, though, is that lots of educators need tools. We don't have the tools in hand, perhaps, to really address SEL needs like the tools we may have in our content area. And bottom line, why is this important? If a student gets out of balance, if their SEL equilibrium is broken, negative outcomes are incredibly likely. Bad things happen. However, educators can't own it all. We already said SEL is a large, complex puzzle piece, and as educators, we can focus on the things that we can focus on, control what we can control, and then know when and how to reach out for more support if there's something that student needs, a network and a resource of support for students. Heather Stow, who I mentioned, she's our Director of Community and Connections. She has 2 quotes that I just really think sum this up. The idea, manage what we can and stay in our lane. Focus on what we focus on and be really, really good at that, and then know when to ask for outside help. And then just the idea that we don't have to own it all, and in fact, we can't own it all.
As we dive into our content this afternoon, we'd like to identify this definition of social emotional learning, and this comes from Castle, which we've mentioned already. I'd like to give you just a moment to read this definition. It is on page 2 in your packet, and as you do so, underline or highlight or somehow identify a couple of words, key phrases that really jump out at you. as you're doing so, we'd like to identify the ones that jumped out at us when we read this definition, and those are the ones that are in red. Maybe they're the same or similar to what you chose, maybe they're a little bit different. We really like these pieces specifically as it relates to the two competencies that we're really going to be diving into today, really looking at developing healthy identities and managing emotions. Continuing on with the benefits of a robust SEL, continuing on page 2, there's just so many benefits, and these are really just a few of them. But some of the benefits include having educational equity and excellence, improved academic outcomes in addition to those improved behavioral outcomes. We think that's really key. Building a better relationships, more trusting and collaborative relationships. That curriculum and instruction becomes more rigorous and importantly more meaningful. And at the end of the day, really this empowers young people, and isn't that a great thing?
Absolutely. Let's dive in and explore CASEL's 5 competencies. There are several groups out there that focus on SEL. We really like CASEL's work, and they identified these 5 core competencies of SEL. You see them listed there and on page 3 of your organizer: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and then responsible decision making. And we today are really going to focus on the first 2, the ideas of self-awareness and self-management. And that's a little bit intentional for a couple reasons. Those 2 are much more internal behaviors or internalized behaviors for students, while the remaining 3 are a lot more external, a lot more visible. Educators may be more familiar with those. A lot of districts are using frameworks like PBIS and other similar ones, and those frameworks tend to focus a little bit more on those external behaviors. We maybe aren't as equipped for those internalized behaviors, and so that's where Chelsea and I are going to focus today, on self-awareness and self-management. Here's another look at how CASEL identifies those frameworks. You start with social emotional learning in the middle, and then surrounding that are those 5 core competencies. And then rings around that, you see the different layers of support, from the classroom to the school to the family to the community. Every one of those pieces plays a role in robust SEL frameworks. Our focus today, own what we can own. We're really going to focus on, again, self-awareness and self-management. Chelsea, you want to walk us through what self-awareness means?
Let's do it. As we dive into self-awareness, we really like this image. We feel like this is a nice metaphor for the idea of self-awareness. The identity that a young person or an adult has can change based on the lens in which we are looking through. Before we even really dive in, I'd like to pose a question to you, and I'm not going to ask you to type this into the chat or anything along those lines, but take just a moment and identify in yourself something that is a stressor. What is the thing that stresses you out that you can identify? I'll give you just a moment, identify what that is, and then just kind of keep that in your mind as we move forward through self-awareness and even into the self-management competency. So what is self-awareness? You have some information here on page 3 in terms of a definition there, and I'll give you a moment to read that definition. And then we're really going to dive into what it looks like, what self-awareness can sound like, and then we're going to provide a specific strategy that educators can use, that you can use in the classroom. So what does self-awareness look like? It's identifying our own emotions, both the educator and the student. And that's so important moving forward to remember, is that if we're really stressed out, it's hard to identify and support a stressed out student, for example. Having an accurate self-perception, recognizing our own strengths, having self-confidence and self-efficacy. What does self-awareness sound like? It's answering and asking ourselves these questions. Again, as educators, as adults, and supporting students to ask these questions of themselves as well. How am I feeling today? And why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? When am I at my best? When do I feel angry? What kind of person do I want to be today? What stresses me out? Going back to that question that I posed to each of you. What are stressors in our lives? How do I fit? Where do I fit into my family, my school community, etc. So with that, how can we support self-awareness in the classroom? We're actually going to show you a video right now. Brent introduced you to kind of our experts in the Vail School District. We took a short clip of Gloria Burnell explaining the ruler strategy. This is a specific strategy that supports that self-awareness that, again, can be embedded in your classroom, can be used pretty simply within your classroom. So we're going to go ahead and show that video.
Okay, so one strategy that I find helpful, or teachers in my school have found helpful, is an approach called RULER, which is an acronym to give you steps to be able to help a student identify and become aware when they're having a particular emotion within the classroom. And RULER stands for, the R stands for first recognizing and understanding that there is something going on with that student and helping them to identify that their emotion or their feeling has some signs that the teacher is identifying in the classroom. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative connotation. It may be that the student is more quiet. It may be that the student is presenting as less talkative or engaged in the classroom. So just recognizing that something's going on. The U for that is understanding where it's coming from. So why is the student feeling this way? Where or has been feeling that way? So understanding and connecting whatever they're feeling with what has happened. Maybe it is they've had a fight with a friend before they came into the classroom. Maybe it is that they came to school and their computer was not charged and they forgot their charger. It's definitely something going on that's responsible for the emotion that they're feeling. The L stands for labeling. So we want to give a word for whatever they're feeling. And oftentimes our biggest mistake is we don't have words, emotional vocabulary for kids. We know happy, sad, glad, mad, but we aren't able to really help them come up with the words like disappointed or enraged or those different levels of emotion that they might be expressing. So once they can come up with a word for it, and I usually just have a little sheet that has over 100 different emotion words that they can actually choose from. Once they choose this word, there is the expression of what that is. I am feeling angry. I am feeling anxious, whatever that word is. And once they're able to express it, then they move to the regulation phase. And with the ruler model, it really is based on a mathematical principle where a student, if they want to shift their emotion to a different feeling, they can identify that feeling. So if they're anxious and they want to feel at ease, you can work with the child very quickly to say, okay, so anxious is low pleasantness and high energy. So what they need to do is just to calm down a little bit, maybe some breathing strategies that are very simple, and do something that they find pleasant. It might be listening to a song for 5 minutes, going to get a walk, something that they find enjoyable in that time frame. So it's quick and easy. It takes longer to express what it is than it takes to actually do that in a classroom setting. So if you can remember the principles of ruler, I've found that to be very successful in working with students.
All right, hopefully you enjoyed learning about that strategy. What I'd like to do now is to ask you to do a little bit of personal reflection. What are some new learnings from the section on self-awareness. Maybe it comes from what it looks like, or what it sounds like, or from that strategy that Gloria Brunel explained so eloquently in her video. What are some new learnings? And you can share as many of these new learnings as you'd like. To do so, we'd like to ask you to take out that phone of yours or open up a new window, again on a new browser window, and go to menti.com, menti.com. Go there, and if you look at our chat right now, we just put in a code, because when you get to menti.com, it's going to ask you for a code. Please put this code in that's in the chat bar and answer that question. We'll give you about a minute and a half to do so.
Cool beans. You better not say we talk too slow. Shanking. Yeah. Right. If he catches it. Yeah. Well, especially if there's something that we need to tweak, let's keep it in its raw. Okay. 8 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, thank you for taking the time to add your new learnings, your takeaways into menti.com there. We really appreciate it. In just a moment, we're actually going to take all of your responses and put them into the chat so that you can all see what other participants shared as well. As we're doing that, we'd like to actually just take a quick pause and give some time for questions and answers into the chat. So please take a moment. We're going to put up a timer here and give you a couple of minutes to add questions into the chat, and also just keep an eye on that chat and see what questions other people are asking. And please feel free to jump in and engage in that chat bar.
Chelsea, that was great. Between what you shared and what Gloria shared, some great tips and tools and just frameworks for that self-awareness piece. I feel like that's part one of the process. I've identified, I'm aware of these concerns. Part two is self-management. What do I do with them? So here's a mirror just like Chelsea showed us, and this person has some self-management reminders on there. Let's take a deeper dive and look at what self-management actually means. We've got this information for you on page 5. The definition is there. I think the first phrase is maybe the most critical. It's the ability to manage your own emotions and thoughts and behaviors. I'm going to follow the exact same framework that Chelsea did. We're going to talk about what it might look like, what self-management may sound like, and then we've got another teacher-tested strategy shared by one of our district experts. We're going to share that with you in just a minute. So still on page 5, some attributes of what self-management can look like. It's ideas like impulse control, stress management. Chelsea asked, what's a stressor in your life? You identified that. You're aware of it. Now what are you going to do about it? How are you going to manage that stress? Concepts like self-discipline or self-motivation, setting goals, and being organized. I try to be organized. I know that when part of my life is disorganized, that is absolutely a source of stress. How do we address and manage these? What self-management might sound like are prompts or statements like, I need a break right now. I love it when a young person or an adult, frankly, is able to verbalize that. I'm feeling overloaded. I need to push pause for just a moment. That's a very mature response. Prompts like, may I please have some space? I'm not ready to share. I think I need help with this topic. I don't understand yet, but I will XYZ to reach my goal. Still on page 5, self-management can sound like each of these. A strategy that we like to share is the 3R strategy, and school psychologist Leslie Anway from our district, the Vail School District, is going to walk us through what the 3R strategy can look like. Take it away, Leslie.
Probably one of the best structures or frameworks that I have found to introduce and present and work with self-management for both adults and for students has come from Dr. Perry's Neurosequential Model. And he bases everything on, it's a brain framework, but it can be really simplified down. And it basically, there's a 3R model that he is the foundation of a lot of his work. And if we regulate our brains first, and that's the first R, is we regulate, we can then relate, and we can then reason. We can't do it in the opposite order. We can't reason before we relate and then regulate. We got to start at the bottom. We have to be regulated. And so in a classroom, typically, and it starts with the adult first. The adult has to be regulated before they can regulate, especially a classroom full of dysregulated children. So it starts here first. And one of the really good strategies that I have found that works really well for adults to regulate themselves first, but also works for students, is mini dosing breaks, regulation strategies. And those are really easy to fit in. All you need is about a minute. So we know as we go throughout our day, we start out our day really very regulated, and our brains are regulated. We, in the mornings, we have our cup of coffee, we, have some good conversations, we're pretty regulated. As we start to move through our day, our brains start to dysregulate. Some of our students come into the class already dysregulated. So there is a co-regulation that happens, or a co-dysregulation that can happen between student and teacher. And so as the day progresses, for most of us, we tend to get a little bit more dysregulated. If you can take a little bit of time, 1 minute in between each class period, 1 minute in between, right before you go to lunch or right after lunch before you go back into, and you do 1 minute of a binaural wave meditation, or whatever it is that is self-regulating to you. If you need something sensory and you need fidgets and you can use fidgets, that is it's sensory regulating. If you do a quick little walk, brisk walk it's 2 minutes long, that can regulate your brain back down to the place where you then are able to regulate your students again as well. But those little tiny regulation breaks with students are just as powerful and just as impactful. And so if you have students who are all over the place dysregulating, and you have 2 minutes, you take 2 minutes to throw in a regulation break, that can get your lesson back on track very quickly.
Welcome back. I just really love that video. Leslie, that 3R strategy is fabulous. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is really the same thing that we did a moment ago with Chelsea. In just a moment, I'm going to have you go back to that your other device or that other browser window. Go back to menti.com, but there's a new code. Check the chat bar for the new code, please. Enter that code, and then I'm going to ask you to share any new learnings, takeaways from this discussion of self-management, and enter more than one, enter as many as you've got, and we'll give you the time to do that again. So we still need to make the mentees. That'll take a hot minute. And we literally don't need to do that until June 8th, but let's get it done. Is there anything else I can help with? I mean, I feel like all the video stuff is kind of in your lap. Okay. And I'm not uploading the presentation. We're uploading this whole enchilada in, I think she said MP4. Okay. All right. Mm-hmm. You want to go and text him? Yeah. All right, thanks everybody for sharing your thoughts and results in Menti. Please do check the chat bar to see those results. We're happy to share them with you. What we'd like to do now is take a few minutes and not close the book on self-management yet. Take a few minutes, share any questions or comments or best practices. Let's have an open chat bar discussion about self-management, the tools we use, the questions we have. Let's facilitate that for a few minutes here. Chelsea and I are on the keyboard ready to engage, but we truly would love to hear from each other as well. Jump in and answer somebody else's question with what you have found to be your best practices. We'll spend a few minutes here.
as we move forward and we're getting close to wrapping up our time together, we wanted to provide some resources, some tools, some supports for when you come across those times where you need something that is maybe outside of the scope of your classroom. You want to help support a student, families, a colleague, and it's a little bit beyond what you can do in your classroom. We have some resources for you, and you do have these listed on page 6. And in fact, in the electronic version of this packet, these are all live links that will take you directly to these pages. The first one we want to point out is the Beyond Textbooks website. This is our website with Beyond Textbooks, and we do have a free public page with no login or anything needed. And so when you go to beyondtextbooks.org, there is a parent portal, again, open to anybody, and there are some great SEL resources there. We're actually going to go there in just a moment live and show you what's on that page. In addition, we wanted to make sure that you had castle.org. We referenced that a number of times today. Also, the 2 videos that you saw today, the ruler strategy and that 3R strategy, we have some links there if you wanted more information about those, and then some other great resources for you there as well. Finally, we know that this is not an all-inclusive list of resources. You may have some great ideas and resources as well. If you do, please type those into the chat now so that others on the line, other participants, and ourselves in the Vail School District, so that we can access those and learn from each other as well. So we definitely invite you to type resources that you're familiar with into the chat at this time so that everybody has access to them. As promised, we'd like to go live onto the Beyond Textbooks website and show you what's there on the parent portal in terms of supports for SEL. All right, so here we are on the Beyond Textbooks website. It is beyondtextbooks.org, and you can see that there is a place up here on the top right to log in, but again, we're not going to do that because all of these resources that we're going to show you are open and available without any sort of login. So from beyondtextbooks.org, scroll down, and what you'll see right in the middle is a box that says Parent Portal. When you click into the Parent Portal, you will see a few things. What I really want to point out is this box here called Social Emotional Learning. That's where we're going to click into. Once you click into that Social Emotional Learning section, you're going to come to a page that looks like this. As you scroll down, just some really important information up on the top there. Mental health first aid, some really important phone numbers and resources there that are really great to have kind of at your fingertips. There's also a great family wellness check-in. Really encourage you to check this document out. And then this resource over here on the right, Where in the Zoo Are You? This is a short story that is just really fun to use with students, and you can just learn a whole lot about them and really offer some great supports via that resource.
And Chelsea, that was written by a local Tucson author, if I remember right, and she really liked the work we were doing with SEL Outreach and made that available to share. So we hope you guys all find it useful, find it enjoyable. Feel free to share that out.
Thank you, Brent. As we move down the page, you'll see you come to 3 tabs, and we've just broken these resources up into 3 different sections. One is resources for caregivers, self-care. One is resources for families, and resources for children. So you can see within each of these sections, I'm on the resources for caregiver self-care. There's a variety of tools here, and these are each links that take you to individual pages. So for example, helpful self-care videos and media. If you click into here, you're going to have some additional links. It says that there's one geared towards teachers, and then other resources that folks can use. The second tab here is resources for families. Again, just ways to support your families. This is something that you can provide direct links to or just direct folks to this particular page on beyondtextbooks.org. Some great resources here that families can use within their homes. And then the third tab, resources for children. Again, we have that Where in the Zoo Are You resource at the top. And then just a variety of links and pages and resources. There's some free books, articles, a variety of tools here that you can use with children, or again, can offer in terms of the links and the support so that you have something to provide in terms of resources.
Chelsea, thanks for that live drive and sharing the parent portal. Again, that's completely freely available. We encourage you to share that link with your school, your community, share that with anybody. We want that to be a resource for everyone. So our final thoughts here, we spent our time together today talking about both the importance and the benefits of a robust social emotional learning program at your site or within your district. We used Castle's framework to identify their 5 core competencies, and again, they are all really, really important, equally important, but Chelsea and I really focused in on the 2 core competencies that are a little more internalized, and we think educators may need some more support, some more tools, some more awareness of. Chelsea walked us through a great network of resources for SEL needs. And before we go to our truly final thought, let's hear one more time from Gloria and Leslie as they share some closing thoughts from our conversation recently.
I guess that I just want to emphasize what I said earlier and what Leslie said as well, that regulation really starts within yourself, and the importance of teachers being self-aware themselves and managing that. They then can model it, and they can show how to do that. And then the other piece is that just asking questions. Sometimes we are we're not emotion scientists, but we kind of just skim over what we notice and never really just ask the questions, like, how are you feeling? So I think that's the big part of SEL too, is the noticing and asking those initial questions and not being afraid that it's going to go into a 30-minute intervention. Sometimes just asking can, identify to a kid that there's something going on and we notice.
That I would say is we already have a lot of SEL happening. And I think SEL, it's so important. We have wonderful curricula that's out there at the high school level. It's really hard for our high school teachers, for them to say, okay, we'd like for you to teach these lessons. So it's really more about integration. How can we integrate, how can we integrate these skills that probably a lot of you guys are already, you're kind of either you're modeling them or you're talking about them within your lessons, but it's really how can we get them within the lessons? I think that's really important point. But also, and that is tier 1. We know that our teachers are our tier 1 level, but we have things happening already at our tier 2 levels. We have speech pathologists who are doing social skills and social emotional groups. That's happening, with all throughout our district. We have some great groups going on. We have groups going on in our Ventana programs, school psychologists pulling groups and counselors pulling groups for anxiety and those types of things. So I think it's important to acknowledge those and then we have some tier 3 happening as well. And a lot of tier 3 we refer out, but I think just acknowledging the multi-tiered nature of SEL as well, and that we're already doing a lot of that work.
I just think the word intentional comes to mind, being intentional about approaching it. So intentional about incorporating it into our lessons, intentional about looking and asking for it. Just being intentional. It's easy to miss if we're not intentional about it. Well, it's easy to miss our own self cues, right? Like, yeah, you don't identify that you're really dysregulated, but then when you sit down and go, oh gosh, I'm a little cranky today, being intentional about it is important.
I loved hearing from the professionals there, Gloria and Leslie. Their closing thoughts, very, very powerful. I think it's all important. What really resonated with me, especially, was that concept of being intentional about including SEL into your core classroom. Chelsea was an ELA teacher, I was a math teacher, and yet we can integrate and incorporate those SEL components into the daily classroom to support not just our students academically, but also socially and emotionally. In a few moments here, in just a moment here, we're going to keep that chat bar open. We'd like you to share both your biggest aha, your biggest takeaway from today, but we're also going to actively facilitate a conversation amongst ourselves, amongst colleagues, whether it's a question, whether it's a comment you have, whether it's a best practice that you have in your place. we'd like to very intentionally spend the next few minutes engaged in a collaborative chat in the chat bar. So in just a moment, we'll jump in there. Chelsea and I have some probing questions to ask, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Before we jump in there, let me just say thank you again for joining our session today. We hope it was valuable. We hope the rest of your conference is also valuable. Chelsea, any final thoughts here?
Just thank you. Thank you for choosing our session today. We're really looking forward to some continued conversation in the chat right now, so hopefully you'll engage with that. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the conference and the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
See you in the chat bar.